Hello, friends. Welcome back to Dentistry Unmasked. I'm David Rice, Chief Editor at Dentistry IQ. Dr. Pam.
Hey, what's going on this week?
It's the usual. Little education, little work, some podcasting. How's about you in Salem?
You know, all is well. I'm really thrilled to have this conversation today because it's going to help me for next week when I have a new dentist shadowing me in the office.
So I'm guessing today we're going to go. We've got these two great guys here, right? We got Levi, we got Justin. We're going to talk about build it or buy it. What should new dentists do? What's the state of the union? What's going on? Guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having us.
I'm interested in hearing what you're seeing and what you're experiencing because you've got kind of more of a global view of what's going on with the new and the young dentist. And I mean that because, you're a young dentist, you graduate from dental school, but even still, you're kind of in a little silo of your friends and maybe a handful of mentors that you might have that are kind of local to that area. So they kind of, with all due respect, kind of know what like you just kind of know what's going on around you. And I recently went to Dykema, where there's this like hysteria around consolidation and you should consider selling your practice and joining a DSO or a DPO or one sort of, an organization like that. Are you seeing a lot of new young dentists just biting the bullet and buying practices? And I guess maybe Levi, you might be able to answer this. Are you seeing a lot of older dentists kind of, saying it's maybe time to dip my toe into the DSO, organization type regime? What's kind of the trend?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen any slowdown for startups and acquisitions in my practice. I reside here in Southern California in Los Angeles. It's the biggest market nationally. Justin could probably attest to that. And so the deals have not slowed down at all. I've been doing this for 15 years, representing doctors in their build outs and acquisitions and sales. And there's always been chatter about consolidations and how are young doctors going to compete with DSOs. I have doctors who their practice model is to set up or buy practices right in the backyard of some of these DSOs, because they know that they're bringing in a lot of patients, but just as many patients are going out the back door. And so there are still thriving offices, single owner, maybe a couple owner offices, because it's, they're personalized. And so a lot of patients do not want to come to a practice where they have a new dentist every time they come in. And so to set up a practice and to really make it personal, there's all opportunities to still thrive, even in a consolidation market.
And I think too, you're either going to build equity for yourself or you're going to build it for someone else. And like that fact remains. So whether you're going to go work for yourself in a private practice, and yeah, there are some, things you're not accustomed to, which being a manager and managing people, right? But like a resource like this wasn't available 10 or 15 years ago, right? There's more information to help those private practice owners. A lot of it, I think, is just mixed messaging, but you really have an opportunity to build that equity, or else why would some of these large organizations be in the space? They're making money off dentists. They're making money off hygienists. Like, it's no secret. I'm assuming that the events get bigger. That should show you that, hey, that would give a doctor confidence that, hey, we don't have to work for somebody else. We've got the opportunity to work for ourselves. And Pam, you said you had an associate starting tomorrow. There's hundreds of stories like that just don't necessarily get told. We hear about all of the bigger DSOs, the affiliations, and I still think, as Levi was saying, at the street level, there are more deals going down for startups and acquisitions than we've ever seen.
It's amazing to me. And, one of the things, Pam, you and I have talked about this in the past of be careful of the half truth, because you might be getting the wrong half. So to your point, Justin, I think people are just by and large getting wrong isn't the correct term, but in essence of the quote, the wrong half, because they're only getting part of the story that tends to help the folks who have, bigger dollars to invest and get in front of a lot of people. So with, private practice alive and well and thriving, when it comes to a young dentist trying to go through that decision tree of, should I build, start up? Should I buy? What are some critical factors that you see, because you work with people all over the country. So, when does it make sense to do one over the other?
And Levy and I could probably go back and forth for this for 3 or 4 hours, along with you individuals, and what everyone's got their own, like what gives you the least amount of anxiety. But we tell doctors, go down both paths, right? Go explore both. So when you make the decision to acquire a practice or start it, you've at least vetted through the process of the pros and cons of each, because there are good things about acquiring a practice, but you might buy a practice and you might need to update the carpet and the website and have some of the technology, and it's nice to go in and have a new shiny office, but patients aren't flowing through like you are in an acquisition. We just say, hey, do your due diligence, talk to subject matter experts, and figure out the path that you're most comfortable with, but be flexible, because Levy's saying this in Los Angeles or Miami or even rural markets, we're seeing if a practice becomes available, you need to be able to jump on it quickly, and you need to be able to make a quick decision. So do your homework ahead of time. And Levy, I don't know what your thoughts are on some of that.
Yeah, this is a question I get asked all the time from young doctors, and it really comes down to what your vision is, right? And what your vision is for practice ownership, and what your vision is for yourself and your timeline. Startups are fantastic because you get almost 100% of what you envision. You get to build a practice up from scratch. You get to make your imprint in it. You get to find the location that you want to work in. But the amount of time it takes to get from the point of wanting to start a practice until it's open, that can be a 12-month, 18-month lag time by the time you find a location, negotiate a lease, build out the office, and get a sustainable patient base. So does that timeline work with your life and what you're trying to achieve, right? If you're going down the acquisition model, you also have to be comfortable about shifting your vision a little bit, because you're buying someone else's practice. So I always tell doctors, if you're going down an acquisition, find a list of 5 to 10 things that you're really looking for. And if a practice is hitting 70-80% of that, that's fantastic, right? Because you can always change out the equipment, you can always shift the practice into a new direction once you get in there and become the owner. But as long as I've been doing this for the last 15 years, it's always been a seller's market, like Justin said. Every time a practice comes on the market, you get 3 or 4 different offers, and it's just, you have to jump in fast. So it's a really matter to, what is the journey that you want to take and the path you want to take? Do you want to get into practice ownership right away, or do you have the flexibility waiting to build out a practice?
I think there's 2 elephant in the room challenges for a young dentist, and regardless of which path they take. So financing is really one of them. Many of them graduate with a ton of debt. So there's that. But also experience. I know that we leave dental school feeling like, yeah, I'm a dentist ready to go. But the reality is, are you ready to take on a responsibility like that by yourself with not somebody necessarily in the office with you? So I know the journey is definitely different for a dentist that comes on via an acquisition. So if that's the case, then the financial aspect of it is their greater challenge. However, those that decide a startup, they now have the experience challenge coupled with the financial burden associated with that as well. Do you see younger dentists coming in, maybe getting their startup, their practice of their dreams, knowing that it's going to take a while to get it going, but then associate somewhere else? So that will bring in an income, give them something to do, some experience to get, possibly have a little mentorship as they get to grow that practice of their dreams. Do you see that kind of hybrid model, and is that working for them?
Justin, you want to take this?
Go ahead. I'll let you take this one.
You have to associate when you're doing a startup. There's really no other way to do it unless you're fabulously independently wealthy. It takes time to ramp up and get into a full fledgling running practice. So almost every associate that I work with that does a startup, and these are mostly specialties, right? Because if you're a specialist, almost all the time you're doing a startup, because there's not as many specialty practices for sale. So that is the primary option that you have. But when you finish your construction, you're open for business, part of your business plan is that you're going to be still associating for 2 to 3 days a week until you're ramping up. But the banks who finance these loans understand that. And so they would not be giving a dentist who has $300,000, $400,000 of student debt, and it's daunting, another $500,000-$600,000 to play with at a 100% capitalization. I mean, you're not coming in as a dentist with any other collateral. You're getting it all from the bank if they didn't believe that you were going to be successful. So, it just takes a little bit more time. And yes, you have to associate in another practice for maybe another year, but usually into the second year, banks forecast nationally, and Justin can talk about this more, that you're going to start making money into your second year. Into your second and third year, you're going to be making more money than you did as an associate.
And I just, again, I go back to the resources, like Dr. Pam and Dr. Rice, when you were in dental school, you couldn't go out of your class and then listen to a podcast like this. Like, you're going to have experts on this podcast. They're going to be able to help doctors throughout their entire transition phase. And whether you use, us or Levi, I don't think that's the key point here. I think it's to use dental specific advisors, including dental specific lenders. And that really says something that lenders are now going into dental schools. They want to present to D3, D4s, talking about basic credit enhancements, what to do, understanding, keeping track of your production and little things that you can do to get qualified. Because again, it goes back to, how do you get to private practice ownership the most efficiently and effective way? And again, to build equity in yourself and keeping track of some of your stats and some of those things, you can get great tips and have a really good understanding, where I don't think that was available 10 or 15 years ago. And we all wish they did more business-like classes and dental school, but dental students are probably like, hey, we go through enough classes as it is. But that's why there are teams of advisors that are just on demand for dentists. And you have to take advantage of that if you're a young doctor. There's people that are really wanting to work with you and work with dental specific advisors.
So I think that's a really great point. And I think it's one of the reasons we really love Aprio. So by the way, shout out Aprio for making this episode happen. But you have a dental specific team, and it spans multiple areas and then partners in other spaces. So, I come to you as a D3, 4, 5, and I need advice. I can get beyond just this teeny little niche. I get kind of a global experience of what I'm about to go through, which I think is really helpful. Because Pam, one of the things you mentioned earlier, and I can't wait to hear your interaction with your student who's going to shadow you, but I'm hearing a lot from students and young dentists, those D5s and D6s even, that one of the biggest things that holds them back is the sheer overwhelm of the people they believe they need to meet in order to really make this happen. So that dental specific team you allude to is really important. Like, how do we help the D3, 4, 5s understand, like, you do need to go get a half a dozen people, but they don't need to all come from entirely different worlds.
And I'll give a shout, like, you need a dental specific attorney. Like, you're going to have to, right? To start a practice or buy, like, you have to have that. And unless, like I said, you have wealth, family wealth or a different, you have to have financing. So, like, I always say, start there, get qualified, talk with an attorney. And then when you get closer, that's when you might bring in other advisors, like an equipment specialist or a CPA or a wealth management. But I think the ones you really have to start with are the attorney and the lender, because obviously without the financing, it's going to be tough to get the project started, and without the legal side and the roadblocks. And let me, I don't know what you're seeing in terms of pitfalls that maybe young docs might want to avoid, as they're looking to start or acquire. That's paramount to us.
Yeah, and once you align yourself with someone who's done the transaction, whatever transaction you're doing, someone who's done transactions like that, they're going to know how to quarterback your deal and get you in touch with the right people at the right time. So, I always tell doctors, I'm very important at a critical moment in your transaction, but once your transaction is over, really, you might be talking to me once every few years on different, practice transition issues. After that, your advisor is really the one who's going to be the relationship manager going forward. And so I can counsel them at different moments in terms of who you're bringing in, and Justin and the bank can do the same thing. And so there's a sense of overwhelm whenever you get involved with something that you don't know. But really, if you can take it just one step at a time, understand the journey that you're going to be going on in broad strokes, and then your team will help fill in the details as you're going along the path.
I can imagine some dental students listening to this, and some are saying, wow, this is really great. Thanks, because I need this guidance. And I can imagine some others are like, whoa, I'm trying to take boards. How is a D3 trying to have this conversation? Like, are you people nuts? Can you break it down for us? Who are you working with? And is it too early for a D3 to start having this conversation? I mean, at this point, and in some schools, they've barely started to see patients. Like, how do they know what kind of practice they want to have? So not to everybody, but I mean, it's certainly a real, it's real in some dental schools. So when should, if you're really trying to be entrepreneurial and get into your own practice as soon as possible, what's that timeline like?
Go ahead, Levy.
Listen, if you're a D3 or D4 and you're listening to a podcast like this, you're so ahead of the game from most dentists that I've worked with early on in my career. You don't need to have an MBA as soon as you get out of dental school. You just have to start getting familiar with some of the concepts and terms. And so don't overwhelm yourself. You have to become a great clinician first, right? You have to become a great clinician first. How fast your hands move, how you produce, the experience you get with patients and your chairside matters. That runs the engine for everything, right? The business aspects of this, understanding the business systems, those are layers that you add on, and it shouldn't happen in dental school. But just getting to know, who are some of the players, what are some of these concepts on a very high level stage is really all you need. And that's what you get with these kind of masterminds and podcasts. I would say it's into your associateship that you can start digging in and working with potentially some advisors to help you along to get you where you want to get to.
I like that. How did you feel, Pam, when you were a D3 and a D4?
Okay, I guess I thought, well, every dentist kind of owns their own practice, right? I was a hygienist before I went to dental school. So I worked for a lot of dentists that were in private practice as solo or small group practices. So I just assumed that at some point, becoming a dentist meant at some point owning a practice. That was just sort of my mindset. So I didn't have a timeline on that. And I knew I was going to residency. So again, really wasn't what I wanted to do. And honestly, I liked being an associate. I enjoyed it, but I felt like in the different offices that I worked, there were different challenges. One office didn't really collect, and it was a bigger practice, and I'd have to sit down every month or so, and I'd see money that was supposed to go to me that went to maybe another associate, or just wasn't collected, or just wasn't submitted. And I didn't like doing that aspect of that job, and I didn't like having to keep track of it. So I didn't think that was a long-term solution for me. But then I worked in another practice that I liked a lot, but I was a hygienist in that practice. And so for me to be looked at as a prosthodontist when I was already there as a hygienist, it just never happened. It just wasn't something where the owner looked at me, I mean, as anything more than some kid that just graduated school. So that really wasn't for me. So it got to the point where I thought, you know what? I have a little problem in every place I work. And I think if it's my problem and I own it, then maybe that's the right thing for me. So that's what prompted me to start looking into buying practices. So I was out for about, I think, 7 years when I bought a practice. So that was me and my journey. And that's what felt right to me. I also felt like I had a lot of experience as an associate. I've done a ton of cases so that, I felt confident being the boss at this point and taking on the challenge of the staff and all the things. But again, maybe I'm just a slow mover. That's possible. How about you, David?
I, I think I felt clinically competent and business clueless. I had which I freely admit. So, for everyone who's a D3, 4, 5, or 6 out here, I knew nothing at all. And I think to what you gentlemen said earlier, and I've always looked at, dental practice success today, much like success in any business, there's a people bucket, a process bucket, and then there's a production bucket. And I liked what you said earlier, Levi, that like your job as a D3 or D4 right now is just get to know the right people. So when you are ready, and you have, guys like Justin in your circle, then she or he can bring the process to you. Because I think for me, I much like you, Pam, like I didn't have a timeline per se. I ended up around 4 years out being an owner, but it was kind of random that maybe I had enough of associateships that didn't go very well. And I just felt like I could drown in this forever if I don't do something. It wasn't, I didn't have a grand plan other than there has to be something better than what I'm doing right now. I don't know.
I think that's so true. I think the essence of that, David, is that, whenever you're on an entrepreneurial journey, whenever you're becoming a doctor, or for me as an attorney, starting out, I was clueless on anything I had to do to start my practice, right? But the biggest success factor that I see in people around me, or I found in myself, was knowing, having that self-awareness of maybe where I may be missing some information, and then not being afraid to ask for help, right? Because the most successful clients I've seen, they'll freely admit, I had no idea what I was doing in the beginning, or I still don't know how to do X, Y, and Z, but I know that I don't know it, and I'm not afraid to ask for help. And they will get from A to B faster than anyone else. And so really, for any young doctor, get your clinical skills down and just have the confidence to ask for help and be aware of maybe what you're missing when you're going along your journey.
And I think one aspect we haven't hit on is the good thing about being an associate now, you're going to have a lot of opportunities to work post-graduation. Like there are a ton of dentists, there's a ton of DSOs that are looking for young doctors to come into their practice. You've got the ability to go in and work at a private practice or work at a group practice. Like in all likelihood, you're going to have some really good options coming out of school to be able to see which path do you want to go. Do you want to, we get associates all the time, they want to work for 5-10 years before they buy a practice, or others are more entrepreneurial to where they want to own multiple practices and know that early on. But I think it's an awesome market for that young associate to be able to say, I've got some really good options from the second I graduate to get my feet underneath me and decide where I want to go, how I want to go about it.
That seems like, for me, the strongest theme, if you will, for this conversation, that even though you might want to buy a practice, or you're like me going under the assumption that you're going to at some point down the road, who knows when that's going to be, that there's options for you, and finding what's right for you is really the best approach. Now, we mentioned putting a team together and starting to do that. I can tell you what I did, and I'm interested in hearing your insights, because at this point, I mean, it is what it is, but there's a power to knowing, liking, and trusting the people that you work with. And so since I started off as an associate, the first partner, if you will, for me was my accountant. And so I had worked with my accountant for several years, so I was 6 years out when I bought my practice. So I had this experience and this relationship with my accountant for 6 years, dental specific, and he helped me kind of create my team, or at least start my team. It's changed a little bit since I bought my practice, but he helped me with, okay, these are banks that are lending. These are so he kind of helped me point into that direction so that I could execute this buying agreement.
I like that.
And just from our side, you mentioned something earlier about student loan debt. That's usually at the forefront of a lot of the young doctors' minds coming out of school. And then when you get to an advisor saying, how do we best tackle this? And let's take everything out of the equation, but this is your biggest concern. Let's build a roadmap to attack this, because this debt, this interest rate gives you the most anxiety. And that might be starting a practice or buying a practice or associating for 5 or 8 years. But that over the, when we're talking with our young doctors and hey, what's on your mind or keeping you up? That's what we're getting the most feedback on. Or they'll probably go on the Levy, even as the attorney, and say, hey, can I afford to buy this? Bank says I can, but I'm not real sure. They gave me an approval letter for $1.5 million, and I've got $500,000 of student loan debt. Can I really do this? And I think you have to, slow down the speed up with the young doctors. You guys have heard me say that before, and explain that, and just make sure that they're comfortable getting some of that stuff knocked away, because it is, finding a job, tackling the debt, oftentimes relocating from a different area geographically to a new location is all part of it, and very, very stressful.
That's a lot of goodness going on there. So Pam, my experience was similar years, but different person. My Patterson rep, Dan Duke, who's, become now a 30-year, like really solid friend of mine. And we call him an advisor and a mentor and all that stuff, but really he's become, in my inner circle of 5 people that I count on personally, professionally. But that's fascinating when you think about it. Like, you had influence from a CPA. I had influence from Dan, my Patterson rep. I think in today's world, what's really important, and to what you just shared, Justin, is our ability to give people enough information, because if they don't have the Dan Duke, or if they don't have that CPA that they know, like, and trust, they just have people, then how do we best arm them with enough information so they can find, Justin, and find you, Levi? Like, how do we do that? Are there resources that you guys can provide that we can help disseminate? Because I think finding the right people is that first piece every time.
Well, Justin, you can speak to that, but I would just piggyback on what Pam is saying here, because I think the CPA a lot of times is the focal point of a lot of these relationships, because in every business, what is measured is improved. This is what I've learned. And that usually comes down to numbers. That's why the Patterson rep, who's in there looking at your systems, what you need, and can see your practice, week in, week out, because they're coming to make visits to you, or the CPA who knows the numbers, can usually spot issues for you before you can say, hey, you need someone, right? You need an attorney for this transaction, or we got to fix this. You got to have HR help here. Your expenses are too high. We're happy to make ourselves available to anyone who wants to talk to us. Justin, you have any thoughts on that?
I just think you can tell, and I know Dr. Pam, Dr. Rice, you just surround yourself with people that are passionate about the industry, and it usually works out. And I think you can tell pretty quickly who's passionate and who's not. Obviously, everybody in here and everyone that's on your show is doing this for a reason, and we're happy to help here at Aprio, as I'm sure Levi is. It is a critical role to have. Unfortunately, not everyone loves CPAs and attorneys, right? But it is very, very critical to the success, and we just are very, very passionate about it, and always appreciate the opportunity to spread the word about private practice and dentistry.
If there's one thing I want to piggyback on your comment about the loan, the amount of loan. If there's one thing anyone takes from this conversation, and I love this fact, is that, I have a lot of associates, they have a ridiculous amount of student loan debt. And they're going to go out and start a practice and buy a practice, and they're going to have to get financing from a bank of $500 to $1 million on top of the debt they have. And they're just riddled with anxiety of fear about how can I make this happen? And there's one fact I always tell them, is that these banks provide 100% financing for these projects, and their default rates are a fraction of 0%, fraction of 1%. So of all the loans nationally that someone like B of A is giving out, just B of A alone in the last 3 years, their dentists have 0% in the last 3 years have defaulted on their loans. What that tells you as an associate doctor is that these banks know you're good as gold, right? Their success rate on these practices are so high because if they couldn't pay the loan, they just wouldn't be successful. And so it can be daunting to go into practice ownership when you have that debt and take on more debt, but it's usually the surest and fastest way to pay off all your student loan debt and invest in yourself.
And the one thing I'd add is banks will not approve you unless you can afford to pay all of your personal debt, your new business debt, and still be profitable. So you are not even at a break-even point. They will not approve you. So there is a factor in there that they have a thing to where you have to historically be able to show that you could make the money or production, which should give you faith that you don't have to go in there on an acquisition and do a bunch of things to make the deal work. The deal works at the time you do it based off the historical data. You make small improvements over time, you're just going to be more profitable. So that's why it's, I think, very, very, again, they're trying to educate on the industry, is because those are profitable deals for the doctor, right? The bank's expecting to be repaid. They have dental specific underwriters that understand the industry. And I think that's the specialty in it.
Yeah. Justin Levi, I think that's a great point for us to wrap up on. This is not like the housing industry of 2008, right? No one's going to give you the money if they don't 100% know that you're going to be highly successful. So it keeps coming back to the right people. You guys are amazing. Thank you for being here. Dr. Pam, you want to take us home?
Absolutely. Again, guys, thank you so much for your insights and your candor. And for those of you out there that are thinking about this, be brave. Make sure it is, though, something you want to do, because I'll tell you now, and I'm sure, David, you'll agree, buying a practice is one of the most rewarding things that you can do, but it becomes your tangible, non-alive baby. And it's something that will, be one of the largest investments you make in your life. So don't worry, it's going to be great, but make sure you love it and it is what you want to do. So I guess that's really the most important thing. And it sounds to me also, it's your journey. So depending on which way you want to take it to get to that endpoint, it sounds to me, as long as you have the right people around you, it will work out. So guys, thanks again. And everybody, we will see you next week.
Pleasure to be here, guys. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Thank you, everyone, for watching or listening to the show this week. And thanks to our guests and sponsors on this episode.
Please check out our social media at Dr. Pamela_Maragliano and at Dental Economics Official.
Or you can check me out at Ignite DDS or at Dr. David Rice.
And go to dentaleconomics.com to receive dental economics. You can choose to receive DE in print or digitally, and you can also get the details of our Principles of Practice Management conference on our website.
If you have topics or guests or anything you'd like to talk about on the show, send us an email to Dentistry Unmasked podcast@gmail.com, and we will do our very best to make it happen. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week.